The Vision circuit to the southwest of Paris played host to the second round of the 2008 VHC endurance season. Some of the usual suspects were missing from the grid, like the Lola of David Ferrer, the Detroit Elva and the Skimama Chevron. But nonetheless, there were 30 cars on the grid, including a few unusual models like this Chevron B21, Lola T286 and even the TVR Griffith 400, powered by a 5-litre Ford V8. On the grid, it's advantage to the number 35 Lola belonging to Jean-Marc Lucot and Patrick Ancelet. With its F1-derived Cosworth V8, it looks unbeatable, on paper at least. Alongside the Lola is the 2-litre powered Chevron B21, driven by Frank Hahn and Philippe Hazenbroek. It's a less powerful car, but in historic endurance, more than any other type of racing, appearances can be deceiving. Well, the other car has got, I think, around about 100 horsepower more than us. But it's not bad for us to do a lap in 1:43 in a car that's almost 40 years old. It's a 2-litre Ford engine prepared by Jeff Richardson, the original engine from the time. Behind the front row, the Chevrons are the dominant force. The number 77 car of Hal Catherwood and Jeff McConville are amongst the quickest. As is the V8 Alpine A240 of Gérard Besson and Marc Piccolo, a car that has been completely rebuilt since the opening race in Jarama. We're on board with the Sylvain Guzenzini and Yann Le Calvez Elva as they ready themselves for this 3-hour race. And it's the number 35 Jean-Marc Lucot Lola that gets away when the lights go out, and it's quickly apparent that the main battle is between the Hazenbroek Chevron B21 and the Piccolo Alpine A240. After making a good start, Bernard Moreau in the 3-litre Porsche is in an early duel with Guanzini in the number 38 Elva. In the battle for second position, it's advantage Besson and Piccolo in the Alpine, passing the Chevron B21 of Philippe Hazenbroek. But there's bound to be more to this story as they remain in each other's wheel tracks over the first few laps. It's still Moreau and Guanzini fighting it out for third position. Saloon versus sports car, GT versus prototype. But however you look at it, it's a superb contest between the two. But none of that should mean that we forget the lone charger out front. Jean-Marc Lucot in the Lola T286 is increasing the gap to the rest of the field on each and every lap. In second place, it's the Alpine A240, the top French runner in the race. Well, we've got a problem with the exhaust, says Besson, and I think that's caused us a few more issues. It's a rare engine. There are only 2 or 3 in the world, so we don't want to take any risks. Apart from that, the car is fine. After a slow start, Catherwood is starting to pick up the pace in search of a podium position. It's not long before he has the third-place runner, number 38 Elva, in his sights, and at the same time he's pulling away from the Bernard Moreau and Miguel Langlois Porsche. Into the second hour, and there's less pressure on the leader. Jean-Marc Lucot has a comfortable gap, helped by the Chevron B21 making a visit to the pits. When it leaves again, it's Frank Hahn at the wheel, tasked with chasing the lead. Well, the car was working well, but after 5 or 6 laps, I had a strong vibration on the front left, so I stopped to be safe rather than sorry. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to change the front wheel. It won't come off, so it's a case of crossing our fingers for the moment. Well, after stopping for a change of driver, it's the turn of the leader to encounter technical problems. Patrick Oncelet spends more than 10 minutes in the pits as a result of the problem with the cooling system. In the GT class, we're used to Team Polivet dominating the proceedings, but on this occasion, it's another Porsche belonging to Marc de Siebenthal and Patrick Bieler that's setting the pace. In second place overall, he's ahead of the car of Miguel Longuin, which has hit problems on the other side of the circuit.
La voiture a coupé. Je pense que c'est le moteur.
Disappointment over an engine problem then, but another Porsche and another couple of loyal Porsche drivers, Joël Bozetti and Michel Nouri, are amongst the 5 fastest pairings on the track, and top 5 is where they will stay right through to the finish. At the checkered flag, the cars crossing the line aren't all on the same lap, so here's a rundown of the order at the end. The 2 chevrons and the Porsche fill the podium, with the latter managing to stay ahead of Hazenbroek and Hahn at B21, with its front wheel still surviving the distance. Despite being less powerful on paper, it's the car that performed strongly throughout the race of the 3 hours that they were out on the circuit. The Elva of Le Calvez and Gunzini comes home in 4th place, despite this minor off in the closing stages of the race. The Elva actually crossed the line in 3rd place, but the number 77 Chevron had its finishing time decreased by 45 seconds after a refueling problem. That was enough to promote them to the podium. An incident for the number 22 Porsche of Eric Have and Gilles Favre brings the safety car out to the track, but it doesn't have any impact on the race order. Despite the order on the track, the Gunzini and Le Calvez in the Elva are 4th, behind Ketherwood and McConville in the Chevron B16. It's the Porsche of Bieler and Siebenthal in 2nd, with Hahn and Hazenbroek in the Chevron B21 taking victory. Well, it's such a good car that it would have been a shame if we hadn't won. Much of it's down to the car. All we did was carefully guide it to the end of the race. It's amazing to think that this car started winning races 35 years ago. Well, after Val de Vienne, it's on to Manicourt at the start of June for the 3rd round of this championship. There were 30 cars on the grid at Val de Vienne in the modern prototype race, with some of the leading British contenders notable by their absence. Just as at Jarama, it was the Villarino brothers that qualified on pole in their Norma M20F. Well, hopefully we'll have a good race and try to be out at front. I think it will be harder to win here, but we'll try to finish on the podium. If we can do that, then that will be a good result. Well, alongside the Spaniards on the front row, it's Jose Ibanez and William Cavaillez, who were almost a second behind in qualifying. Nonetheless, it leaves the 2 Frenchmen in a strong position at the start of the race, but they need to keep an eye on their mirrors, with Philippe Hazenbroek and Damien Toulemont sure to be keeping them honest, as will Julien Schell and David Cosanel in the first of the Ligiers, run by Pegasus Racing. So as the race gets underway, Julien Schell is quick off the line, making up a place over the course of a spectacular opening lap. Meanwhile, behind the leaders, it's important for the rest of the pack to keep their eyes on the flags. because there's a clash between the front row sitters, leaving the track clear for those behind them. The result of Julien Schell's impressive opening lap, well, he leads the race, second at Jarama. He said he wanted to go one better here, and he started the right way. But he won't have it all his own way, though, with the Guillet Arnaud Norma staying in touch, as are the Hazenbroek and Robert cars. After their early indiscretion, the Cavalles and Ibanez Norma is working his way back through the pack, but seems to be dropping liquid at certain points around the circuit. It's not the same story for the pole sitters, however, who find themselves being lapped by the leaders. There are just two radical SR3s in the race at Vigion. This car, belonging to Giovanodi and Gourmelon, is running in the top half of the field when it falls victim to what looks like a stuck gearbox at the start of the second hour. With the car stranded on the track, the safety car is brought out, which bunches up the leaders and sends the whole host of teams into the pits to refuel. Almost all the leaders take the opportunity to pit. At the front is still Julien Schell leading the race ahead of William Carriez, Philippe Hazenbroek and the number 69 Norma of Thirion and Bazot. However, drama a few minutes later with the number 3 Norma pitting after running out of fuel. It quickly becomes much clearer just what happened in the early stages of the race. Well, the car got away from me at the first right-hand corner. It was a bit like being on ice. It seemed that when we fill the car up and then sit in it, some of the fuel escapes. Some of it seems to get on the tyres, which obviously makes the car hard to control. Still at the front, and now with a reasonable gap, is Julien Schell. He seems to have found his rhythm, but that rhythm is broken by having to make a mandatory refueling stop. The same is true of Ander Villarino. Having taken over from his father at the wheel, he's rapidly making up ground on the leaders. When the safety car comes out again, there's another rush for the pits, and this time there are some tactical decisions to be made amongst the leaders. Most of them make a stop, and the last of them is Julien Schell, who hands over the number 18 Ligier to David Cozenel. But there is dismay amongst the team as the car is blocked by a red light at the end of the pit lane. Well, the race was going very well. We had an excellent car, but the problem is that the race director put the safety car out twice when there was no reason. That meant I lost 30 seconds. Then it kept me in the pits, even though they said that it would only go red when the safety car was on the pit straight. It was still 2 corners away. We'll be putting in a protest because that's not right. What it all means is it's the number 4 Norma that leads in the closing stage of the race. François Desprez is at the wheel, and he's being trailed by Jose Ibanez. In 5th place, Fabien Rosier and François Guillet Arnaud are enjoying a consistent race after starting on the 3rd row of the grid. Fourth is the Hazenbroek and Toulemont car. They have been in touch with the leaders right the way through the race, but a puncture just after the halfway point ended their hopes of making it onto the podium. As for the battle for victory, well, that goes right down to the last few meters of the race as François Desprez and David Cozenel continue to fight it out. The Ligier is right on the tail of the leader, just 8 tenths behind, when the race is brought to a halt by the red flag. It's a premature end for what was building up to be quite a crescendo. Remarkably, at the end of almost 3 hours of racing, there's just a single second separating the two cars. In the end, then, it's victory for Lionel Robert and François Desprez. Well, it was a difficult race, as you saw, and it was pretty close at the end. My teammate François did very well to recover from jet lag after flying back in from the States. He did the last leg up against the younger drivers who were better prepared for the race, so it's really great credit to him. Well, the Norma versus Ligier battle continues at Manicourt at the start of June. Porsche, Ferrari and Maserati are all bound to be found in a GT race, alongside a few other exotic brands. This is a class that always throws up a few surprises, and qualifying on this occasion was no exception. On pole position is the #1 Ferrari F40 with a best lap of 1 minute 39.352. Alongside Jean-Paul Pagny and Pierre Benoit on the front of the grid is the Mégane Trophy of Guillaume Rousseau and Christophe Lemay at their home track. Well, we worked really hard on this track at Val de Vienne. We really wanted to do well here. I was so close to getting pole position. 1:38 was possible, but it's good to be on the front row, so I'm pleased for the team after all the work they've put in. The Mégane is surrounded by some of the GTs, with the Porsche 996 of Bernard Moreau and Miguel Lunga in 3rd position. Another Porsche, that of BF Racing, driven by Manuel Ferreira, is also likely to join the fun just behind. And it starts to hot up right from the start, with Jean-Paul Pagny missing his braking point at the first corner, allowing his opponents to get past. The early leader is Miguel Longa, moving to the front on the opening lap. The established hierarchy changes totally over the course of just a few hundred meters, with the Mercedes silhouette of Guerin and Lacoste passing Lemay in the Mégane. It looks set to be a battle of the Porsche 996s at the front, with Miguel Longan just ahead of Manuel Ferreira in the lead for the race. The temperatures are up to 80 degrees in some of the cockpits, but there is still more than 2 hours of the race remaining. We're on board with the Ferrari 430 of Jean-Paul Pagny here, who's back into the top 5. But he's clearly having trouble in the tough conditions. It's even difficult for Gérard Tremblay in the Maserati GT4. They can only dream of having air conditioning. The Maserati is just on the fringes of the top 10. The same is true of the former race leaders, who are in the pits to switch drivers. Pierre Benoit takes over the wheel, which gives Jean-Paul Pagny a chance to tell his side of the story for that tricky start to the race. Well, I damaged my tyres when I was trying to warm them just before the race. When I got to the first corner, I just went straight on. Everybody went past me, and it was really hard to go right back up through the order. I managed to start to work my way back through, though. Well, the surprise of the early stage of the race is the Team Nori Porsche, driven by Philippe Boulonière and Joël Vicaire, which is running in a provisional podium position. Now it's the turn of Christophe Lemai's Magan to pit, handing over to Guillaume Rousseau. They're still in the top 5 with their sights set on the podium. Climbing back up from 11th to 3rd, Richard Depagneau and Damien Collet are showing their competitive side, but at the moment, it's still the Porsche Polybay in charge. It's almost time for Miguel Longuin to hand over to his teammate Bernard Moreau. He comes into the pits after almost an hour and a half of racing. It's the same for Richard Depagneau, who hands over to Damien Collet as they continue to chase the podium. Well, the start was interesting because I quickly thought I had a good chance. I felt that we could challenge some of our competitors, so I decided to push hard and get the most out of the car, and it worked. The car was very consistent. It's the best car that I've ever been able to drive.
L'auto était parfaite, très constante, agréable. C'est la première fois qu'on a une auto aussi sympa à conduire.
Well, the early leaders also make their stop, with Bernard Moreau taking the wheel for the remainder of the race, and it proves to be a tough stint. Well, the problem today is the heat. He had to work really hard around the heat, taking on drinks and keeping the tyres working well. He couldn't push the tyres too hard early on, or it would mean that they wouldn't last for the whole stint. It was also important to try to make the fuel last as long as possible. We wanted to make sure we stayed out for an hour and a half so that we could make sure Bernard could finish the race on a single tank. And Moreau is pushing hard to try to gain ground, maybe a little bit too hard at times. Moreau gets back on the track though without losing too much time. He left the pits in second place behind Guillaume Rousseau in the Mégane Trophy. As the race goes on, the heat combined with technical failures start to take its toll. One of the victims is the sole Maserati in the race. Philippe Baudinaire in the Nuri Porsche is in third place, but he's far from safe with several other cars just behind him. Just outside the podium places is Pierre Benoit. Despite his best efforts, he can't quite catch up the leaders. The #1 Ferrari ends the race in 4th. In third place is Damien Collet. On the podium outright, it's also a class victory, marking one of their best races in the last couple of seasons. In second place is the Polybay Porsche, driven by Bernard Moreau, who manages to hold out in the heat. That heat is one of the reasons that race leader Guillaume Rousseau is forced to hand over the wheel to Christophe Lemay just before the end of the race in order to avoid becoming ill. Nonetheless, the pair hang on to take victory. Well, the heat really got to him. It's really hot in the cockpit, and he hadn't had enough to drink. He came in, and I drove the last 20 minutes so that we could make it to the finish. But not only did we finish, we actually won the race, so we're really happy. The car worked really well.
Belle première place, on est super content. La voiture a super bien marché, et voilà quoi.
Now the GTs head to Manicourt for the third race of the season at the start of next month.